Welcome to Lake St. Clair and the Lake St. Clair Fishing Show.
Let's look at the Lake St. Clair Fishing Show upcoming tournaments. This is the Saturday, June 29th. We have two tournaments on Saturday. Cash for Bass is in the news again. They're starting their Saturday Opens, Saturday, June 29th. They'll be launching out of Harley-Ensign. Registration is at 5 o'clock. That's an open tournament. Anybody can do. It's a team tournament. Something new we're going to start looking at is All-Star Anglers. They're launching actually down on Lake Erie. They're launching out of Lake Erie Metro Park. All waters are open, so we expect some of those anglers may actually run up to Lake St. Clair. Check out the information on the screen for All-Star Anglers, information how to contact the tournament director, John Angelo, to find out when their events are, entry fee, things like that. Cash for Bass, of course, is cashforbasstour.com. Information on the screen. For this weekend, on Sunday, June 29th, I actually don't have any tournaments that I'm aware of for that day. There may be small tournaments, small events. We do have a weekday tournament coming up on Tuesday, July 2nd. NBAA, Mark Hill and Mike McGrain will be holding their tournament from 6 p.m. to 9 p.m. out of Harley-Ensign. You have to be an NBA member to fish that circuit, but that does put you into qualification for their bigger events later on. I want to add though, normally Thursday would be another Cash for Bass Thursday Tour event, but due to the fact that it is the 4th of July, they will not be holding Cash for Bass next Thursday. They will resume the following Thursday though, so again, for more information on that, cashforbasstour.com, and to check into the NBA event, it would be nbaa-bass.com. If you're holding an open bass tournament this year and you would like to make Lake St. Clair Fishing Show aware of it so we can consider adding it to our weekly video reports, please email your tournament details to info@lakestclairfishingshow.com. Email address on the screen for correct spelling, and we'll look at adding it to our weekly video reports. Thanks. Let's look at the Lake St. Clair Fishing Show recent tournament results, give you an idea what's going on the lake. Of course, last weekend, Saturday, the big tournament was Monster Quest 8. They ended up with 90 boats, pretty good turnout. Interesting, they worked with the city of St. Clair Shores going out of the 9-mile ramp. I always like to see that. Local business, local government working with bass tournaments to boost our natural resource economy. Weights were about what you expect for this time of year, post-spawn spawn. Jeff Cox and Matt Ballatini ended up taking first place with 21.5 pounds. That's pretty good. Second place was Skip Johnson with 20 pounds 6 ounces. Those were the only two 20-pound limits, but then the next 6 spots, 5 or 6 spots, had over 19 pounds, almost 20 pounds. Some people are saying that's down a little bit from previous years, but actually last year was exceptional because we had that real warm spring and it got fish into the summer pattern a little early, enough fish that the weights were up. So anytime you have the top 10 all over 18 pounds, most of them over 19 pounds, that's a pretty good fishery. That's a lot of nice bass. Big bass was 5 pounds 5 ounces. That was the first place team. And second big bass was another 5-pounder, 5'3", Dan Mason and Jeff Gibson. They've won tournaments this time of year fishing the offshore post-spawn fish. So it looks like things are, even though we're a little behind because it was a little colder this spring, the fish are trying to catch up quick. As Wayne reported, we're already having some fish caught in the channels a little bit quicker than people thought. I think the bass, they do try to catch up and they do try to just go about their business. So I would recommend the same thing for you. Get out there on Lake St. Clair, go about your business. You should do pretty good if you keep your confidence up and vary your retrieves and just keep moving till you find fish. Good luck.
Well, things are really changing out here on Lake St. Clair this week. This week we're going to have a lot of rain, a lot of storms. And one thing, if you haven't been here in about a month, back then the storms would completely waste the entire lake. It becomes silted up. But right now we've got some decent weed growth. And what that does is that'll hold back a lot of that silt. So some of these big storms, sure, they're going to silt parts of the lake up, but other parts of the lake are going to remain clear. That can be a real advantage when you're trying to find those tournament quality fish. So try to stick around weeds or weedy areas if you want to find the clearer water.
I want to remind you once again, make sure you check out the weather, marine weather, before you go out onto Lake St. Clair. It's a big lake anywhere in that system. You want to make sure you have up-to-date information. You can always go to greatlakesbass.com/weather, and you'll find links for pretty much everything. Weather buoys, the National Weather Service marine forecast for the various lakes. You'll see a link for Lake St. Clair U.S. weather report. You can also look at satellite images. There's links for that, so you can check out water quality. There's also surface temp maps, pretty much everything you need. Looking at the actual weather at the moment for Saturday, north winds 5 to 10 knots, mostly cloudy with a chance of showers or a chance of thunderstorms, waves 2 feet or less. Now with a north wind, that can always be pretty variable depending on what part of the lake you're on. Sunday, northeast wind 5 to 10 knots. That's one I always want to make sure I get up to date forecast for every few hours, see what's happening. Again, a chance of showers and thunderstorms. Probably means it's just going to be very warm. Those resources that I have on the weather page can help you plan your weekend and your fishing excursion, maybe make your mind up about where you want to run to. So make sure you check into that. One of my favorite resources is the Canadian Weather Buoy on Lake St. Clair. If you go to the weather page on greatlakesbass.com, greatlakesbass.com/weather, you can see a link for the various weather buoys around the Great Lakes. The Canadian Weather Buoy is right in the center of Lake St. Clair, and that can be a pretty good resource to see wave height at the moment, and wind direction, wind speed, surface temp, all those pieces of information that can give you a good idea of what's going on out in the lake before you head across. So I would recommend you check that out.
Of course, we've been talking about being in the post-spawn period, and one of the significant things about the post-spawn period is the bite. It can be wild and crazy and good, or it can be just flat and real tough. Last weekend, we had some tournaments go out, and they definitely had a lot of 19-pound limits, some 20s. So we're seeing some of the things that were pretty normal for this kind of time of year. Those weights should go up with each tournament for the next month or so. We've been talking about the post-spawn period for a couple weeks now. And one of the most significant things about this period is the bite. Transition spots can be hot, hot, hot. And you can just go up and just get on them and have a great time and thinking, yeah, you got this tournament won for sure. You go back the next day and they're gone. That's not unusual during the post-spawn. So it's good to line up a number of these transition spots and basically do a milk run. Now, if you're going to fish an area and fish flats, I recommend moving quickly. Some people like to use a crankbait. What I like to do sometimes is drift very quickly across these flats with the baits that I have. Once I find spots, I'll GPS those spots and I'll return back to them on the drift, and I'll drift slower the next time around. But initially, you want to cover that flat quickly with plastics. So whether you fish transition spots or flats or both this weekend, it's definitely going to be another exciting weekend with smallmouth bass fishing on Lake St. Clair.
One thing you're definitely going to want to take into consideration this weekend, same thing happens every year this time. You have the gigantic mayfly hatch started around the 19th or 20th, and it's ongoing. That's always a major influence on a fair number of the bass, what they're doing, besides the perch bite. But even though a lot of anglers talk about how it's a lot more difficult to catch bass during this time, I always liked it because it could be a pretty good way to tell you where a lot of bass are just by watching the water, especially if you find slicks or that active surface feeding. So if you got a little bit of calm weather, especially earlier in the day, make sure that you keep your eye open for fish hitting the surface. Wayne always covers the best way I've seen to take advantage of that overall is I would recommend the Extreme Bass Tackle Mayfly tube, and rather than just casting, if they're actively hitting the surface, just hold your rod steady and wait for the hit. As soon as the fish hits the surface, throw the tube right into that center of that ring that the fish created and let the tube drop straight down. From everything I've seen overall, that's the best way to take advantage of that bite and catch the most fish, unless they're really going crazy under a big slick. Just remember that little tip. One other tip I always have for this time of year, and it's kind of an odd one, but it's worked for me quite often over the years, is white crankbaits. I don't know why that works exactly better this time of year, but for whatever reason it does. I've caught a lot of big fish that way. The mayflies are brown to yellow, but I think it's just something different. It comes through and it makes bigger fish react to it. So that's a big fish trick I use when I'm working around mayflies, but I'm not seeing enough activity to cast to. Give it a try. Who knows, it may work for you like it's worked for me in the past. Of course, because people do talk so much about how it may seem harder to catch fish this time of year because of all the mayflies, again, I look at it as an opportunity because it tells you where a lot of fish are. And we know a lot of fish have recently spawned, and there are still fish spawning, as a matter of fact, and they may spawn for a while yet if you want to look for them. And don't be afraid to look up kind of shallow too, because there are fish real shallow right now. Definitely seen reports of that. But the mile roads is a good example. There's still a lot of fish in that 6 to 10 foot range. You just need to move around. Make sure that you vary your retrieve too. A lot of people don't experiment enough with that, and this is definitely a time of year where the way you retrieve your lure, especially tubes or baits like that, can have a big impact on the number of fish you catch and the size of fish you catch. A lot of people are doing short hops and short jumps and snatching it off of the weeds. That's a really good way to turn a few extra fish, sometimes a whole bunch of extra fish. So don't get stuck in the rut of just casting your bait the same way. I think Wayne will help you out a little bit with that too.
One of the questions I get asked a lot is, should we be fishing the U.S. side or Canadian side to get our biggest fish? Certainly there's advantages both ways. The Canadian side has the advantage of really not being fished a lot over the last month. And also the fishing pressure is generally lower. From the U.S. side, you have to travel long distance to get to those spots, which eliminates some of your fishing time. But it could be worth it. If you're in the Canadian shoreline, certainly you're in Canadian water, you've got it made. On the Canadian side, you're right there. However, don't count the U.S. side out. There's a lot more fishing pressure, but there's a lot of good fish to be had. And what are we looking for? We're looking for 5 big bites. Certainly you can find that on the U.S. side. You have rock sand combinations on the U.S. side, you have weed sand combinations on the U.S. side, you've got flats, you've got current, you've got a lot, it has a lot to offer. So if you get on one of those transition spots, you're going to load your boat in a hurry. If you get on a school that are feeding on mayflies, you're going to be on your fish in a hurry. If you get on a school of smallmouth busting minnows, you're going to be on your fish in a hurry. So there's a lot of that going on the U.S. side for sure, and on both sides. So don't count the U.S. side out. Now for me, if for my choice, I'd probably do a combination of both. We're already starting to see some fish in the channel system already that are worth going after. One tournament was won with fish primarily out of the channel system this weekend. Myself, I don't mind making long runs to catch my fish and hitting multiple spots. If you'd rather sit in one area and work the area, you have a lot of good choices. You've got the mile roads, you've got the Bell River Hump, even areas around the Firecracker. You can work those areas all day long and come up on different schools of fish. So there's lots of options both ways. So whether you're fishing on the U.S. side or the Canadian side this weekend, I think the best side to be on is where you find your confidence spots. That's where you'll do the best.
Wayne touched on this, and I always like to talk about this time of year. I call it the clash. It's the should I stay or should I go syndrome. Wayne says it's should I fish U.S. or Canada. I like the clash better. It's kind of funny. But one thing I want to add to Wayne's discussion is consider the weather, as I mentioned earlier, but also I understand that it's a jobby nooner weekend. If you haven't been around that before, it means that Gull Island area, the shipping channel, the Old South Channel, all that area is going to be really busy with boat traffic, a lot of pleasure boats. Gull Island should have quite a few boats surrounding it, so if you're going to fish that area of the lake, you might want to fish that first thing in the morning and then move out to other waters. Just suggestion on adjusting your fishing to conditions. That's definitely a condition if you've never seen it.
Well, that's it for this week. Join us next week on Friday and every other Friday to the end of September, and we'll give you the latest news and bass fishing updates on Lake St. Clair. See you out there.